I remember when I was a newly recovering atheist, and I'd had that perspective for a number of years since being brainwashed by my brother into not believing in God because religion was irrational. And but then I had some new perspective, and I thought, okay, there's some divine entity behind or within all of this. And around that time, I went for a long walk alone up a mountain, and it wasn't a very big mountain. It took about an hour or something to climb it. It's called Mount Kaukau near Wellington, where I lived. And when I was about halfway up, I sort of stopped for a little rest, and I sat down on a log, and I was looking down at the ground, and there was a little group of ants running around, thinking ant thoughts, I guess, and doing their ant work, and one of them was a bit bigger than the others, and I was thinking maybe that big ant thinks it's a very special ant and it's more important than the other ants. And I was kind of thinking about these ants, and I was thinking, those silly little ants, they have no idea that there's a giant human being looking down at them, thinking about them. And then I kind of looked up. And I got some perspective for a moment on how, on microcosm, and how silly and tiny and self-important I was. And I've thought about that a lot, because it reminds me of, my relationship with Parampurusha. I mean, the difference between an ant and me seems big, right? But it's much less than the difference between me and Parampurusha. So that's one perspective. And Baba talks about our different ways that we can relate to Parampurusha, and how Parampurusha is within everything. He's within every atom and every molecule, and within our hearts. That's the most important perspective for me. But at the same time, he says how we are within him. And it seems like a paradox, but to me, both of these perspectives are real and very beautiful, and really worth remembering all the time. And he folds all of these, a number of different perspectives into our sadhana and our different practices. And I love this part where he says that your whole life is sadhana in this discourse. That when we're really practicing sadhana, we feel like it's all the time. It's not just when we're sitting for meditation, and that's really the inner spirit of sadhana. So one of the I think, Baba seems to think this perspective is perhaps the most important one for us, is what he describes in his, when he taught us Guru Sakasha, and of course in our 6th lesson, and we can also practice this in our 1st lesson, and in some of the other sadhana lessons that maybe come later. And that is, what? What's it called? Yeah. Baba has a discourse about this perspective, which he calls it the secret of meditation. So, okay, now a lot of you know what I'm talking about. So it's when we reverse our perspective. We're used to sitting there in sadhana, and initially you're sort of trying to imagine Parampurusha, and okay, I'm little and tiny, and he's great and infinite, and I can't imagine that because my mind is finite and he's infinite. So that's a paradox, right? So he says, okay, the solution to this is to feel that he is thinking of us, and we are the object, and he is the subject. And by reversing our perspective, okay, our mind is still finite, but it creates this sense of relationship. And that's the key, to feel that he is thinking of me, and he cares about me, and he loves me, and that's continuous. And there's a really neat drawing I found once, and I use this a lot in my classes, of a very grumpy, many of you have seen this, a very grumpy looking old guy and he's sitting there looking extremely miserable, holding an umbrella over his head. And there's a rain of hearts falling down. And of course his umbrella is preventing him from feeling this rain of love. And there's a discourse many of you have heard when Baba talks about that. There's this constant rain of grace falling down on our heads. And what prevents us from feeling it? The ego-shaped umbrella, remember? I love that. So this is drawn by somebody who I'm pretty sure has no knowledge of Ananda Marga or Baba's philosophy, but that artist kind of got it. And if we can fold that ego-shaped umbrella, then we can really feel what the reality of that continuous relationship with him, that he's thinking of us. We are always the object of the undivided love of the creator of the universe. And that's a pretty nice perspective. And I try and feel that as much as possible and remember that as much as possible. And the more I do, the happier I feel. So that's what I try and do in sadhana. I remember there was one amazing acharya, Dada Nabhaniilananda.
Yes.
He was Baba's friend. They knew each other from when they were young. And he was our acharya examiner. I know we were talking about him the other day, a number of us. He was gave us our acharya exam. He was a very, very blissful person. And Baba taught him the Shesh Yoga and all the advanced lessons in meditation. And somebody once asked him what he actually does in his meditation, and he was quite old at this stage, and he always seemed to be kind of pretty blissed out, to put it mildly, when I met him. And somebody asked him what he did during his sadhana, and he had all these very complex practices that Baba taught him, and he said, I just close my eyes and I go off with Baba. That was it. And I thought, well, that simplifies matters. So I try and emulate that very, very simple, pure, devotional perspective as much as I can. And maybe you'd like to do that too.